Before we begin, how are you feeling today? I hope you're okay and taking care of yourself. If today was a bad day, I'm glad you're here. Take a deep breath. This moment is yours. Ready? Let's begin. There is a world we live in every day. One built not of stone or steel, but of pixels and screens and unseen connections stretching farther than the eye can see. A world where every moment can be shared, every thought broadcast, every small beauty turned into spectacle. Yet beneath that surface, a different reality hums quietly. A truth we seldom confront until it brushes too close. Our lives in the digital age are not only witnessed by friends and family, they are observed by strangers, curated by algorithms, and sometimes twisted by those who see us not as people, but as objects to be claimed. Tonight we step into that unseen world, not with loud warnings or sharp alarms, but with quiet stories that whisper of the dangers hidden in plain sight. Stories of trust misplaced, of privacy surrendered too easily, of the slow creeping dread that blooms when we realize we are not as alone as we thought. These are not tales of distant lands or imagined horrors, but reflections of the world we have built and the cracks that form when we mistake connection for safety. As we move through these 8 stories, I invite you to listen. Not with fear, but with awareness. Let them be a mirror held gently to the choices we make each day about what to share, what to protect, and what to keep sacred. There's a strength in knowing when to speak and when to guard the silence, a wisdom in recognizing that the most valuable moments often happen unseen. So take a breath, settle in, and let us walk together into the quiet spaces where real life still waits patiently to be lived beyond the reach of the scrolling gaze. Story 1. The Danger You Share Unknowingly. The afternoon sun burned low over Savannah, Georgia, drenching the narrow cobblestone streets in a molten gold light as Marissa Holloway, a 24-year-old graphic design student, hurried across Lafayette Square, her phone buzzing constantly in her jacket pocket. For weeks, she'd been sharing her art online, gaining a modest following on a popular social media platform, known for its unpredictable algorithms and even more unpredictable audience. What started as harmless validation quickly evolved into something she could not control. It was not the attention that unsettled her, but the persistence of a single follower. A profile with no real name, no posts, only a simple black and white avatar and messages that gradually blurred the line between admiration and obsession. Marissa first noticed the unease settling inside her during her evening walks home. The feeling of being watched clung to her like humidity in the thick southern air, turning familiar streets into corridors of doubt. She told herself it was irrational, a side effect of spending too much time immersed in the curated illusions of others' lives. But reality, unlike social media, was harder to mute. She began receiving small gifts on her doorstep, unsigned sketches mimicking her own style, anonymous letters praising her work with unsettling intimacy. Her friends at Savannah College of Art and Design, like Jeremy and Nina, reassured her it was probably a secret admirer, but Marissa could not shake the growing sense of dread gnawing at her composure. One evening after an exhibition downtown, she decided to deactivate her account, thinking the problem would evaporate once she cut the connection. Instead, the silence grew heavier. She spotted a figure outside her apartment building more than once, always in the shadows, always vanishing before she could make sense of it. The local police were sympathetic but limited, citing the absence of direct threats or evidence. Marissa moved to a new apartment on East Bay Street, hoping the physical distance would break the invisible thread tying her to that faceless presence. But the notes followed. They slipped through the cracks of her door, tucked neatly between the pages of her mail. Each one was a reminder that no lock, no new address, No digital disappearance could sever a bond forged by exposure. Late one stormy night, as lightning fractured the sky above the Savannah River, Marissa's world narrowed to the glow of her phone screen. A live feed began broadcasting from an anonymous account. The camera showed the hallway outside her apartment. She froze every breath, a painful drag against the weight in her chest. A knock at the door followed, not frantic but deliberate, patient. In that moment, Marissa understood what real vulnerability meant, a lesson too often ignored in the age of curated personas and filtered perfection. She called the police with trembling hands, her voice barely recognizable to herself. When they arrived, no one was found, only a single note taped to the door reading, "See you soon," in childlike scrawl. Marissa left Savannah the next day without telling anyone her destination. The ordeal taught her what no college course could, that our need for connection must be balanced with a fierce commitment to protecting our boundaries. Oversharing online can invite not only admiration, but danger. And not everyone who applauds your work has pure intentions. To anyone listening tonight, take a moment to reflect on the footprints you leave behind on the internet. Sometimes the people who seem most invisible are the ones watching closest. Your safety, your peace of mind, your real life matter infinitely more than any number of likes or followers. If this story resonates with you, I invite you to stay connected here. Not for validation, but for a community that values your well-being. First, subscribe if you find value in these reflections, because together we can remind each other that real life is worth protecting far more fiercely than any digital one. Thank you for being here, and remember, true safety starts with small choices made every single day. Marissa had thought she was strong enough to outrun her fear, but fear is not something you can leave behind in a different zip code or erase by deleting a profile. It seeps into your bones, it takes root in your memory, and it waits patiently for a moment of weakness. A few months after leaving Savannah, she settled into a small town in North Carolina, a place where the mountains rose like ancient sentinels and the mist clung low to the fields at dawn. She rented a modest apartment above an antique store run by an elderly couple who treated her with the kind of quiet kindness that made her feel human again. Slowly, she began to rebuild a routine. She volunteered at the local library. She started painting again, mostly landscapes and abstract pieces that had nothing to do with the digital world she had left behind. There was peace in anonymity, a peace she was determined to protect. But trauma does not ask for permission to resurface. It creeps in during the quiet moments when the mind lets its guard down. It was during one of these moments, as Marissa sorted through dusty paperbacks at the library, that she found a book tucked between travel guides. A hardcover with no title, only a note inside. In the same childlike handwriting she thought she had escaped. "Missed you." Marissa dropped the book as if it had burned her fingers. Her pulse hammered in her ears and the familiar helplessness returned, crushing her breath and leaving her suspended in terror. The small-town charm could not shield her from what she had carried within herself, all along the knowledge that she was being hunted not out of malice, but out of a twisted affection that did not understand or respect boundaries. She did not tell the police. This time she knew better. Now she understood the limitations of the systems designed to protect people like her. Instead, she decided to reclaim her power in the only way she could, by refusing to live in fear. Marissa took a deep breath. She returned the book to its shelf as if nothing had happened. She finished her shift with steady hands and a hollow smile. She walked home under the golden autumn leaves, refusing to glance over her shoulder, refusing to give whoever was watching the satisfaction of her fear. In her small apartment, she unpacked her paints, she set up a new canvas, and she poured everything she had into it. The fear, the rage, the defiance, the sorrow. The understanding that sometimes survival is not a single decision, but 1,000 small ones made every day. She painted through the night, the brushstrokes wild and raw, and when she finally stepped back at dawn, the first light spilling over the Blue Ridge Mountains, she realized the painting was not just a landscape, it was a map of her own endurance. To anyone listening tonight, remember this. Survival is not a straight path. It is not a perfect narrative where fear is conquered once and for all. Survival is messy. It is waking up every day and choosing to fight for your own peace, your own sanity, your own future. No one else can fight that battle for you, and if you have ever felt watched, followed, judged, or silenced, know that you are not alone. Your story matters. Your safety matters. Your peace matters. If this story has spoken to a hidden part of you, I hope you will stay a while with us here, where real life is valued and your voice is heard. Feel free to subscribe if you believe in creating spaces where safety and connection matter more than fleeting fame. Together, we can build something stronger than fear, stronger than silence, stronger than the shadows that sometimes follow us. As we leave behind the echoes of one journey into vulnerability, we step quietly into another, where the familiar landscapes of small towns and trusted spaces reveal that danger sometimes wears the face of neighborly connection. Story 2. The Invisible Hand. Behind the screen. Jason Brooks was a 27-year-old paramedic living in the small town of Whitefish, Montana, a place where the mountains kissed the sky and the air always carried a faint scent of pine and wood smoke. In a world that moved too fast, Jason preferred the slower pace of mountain life, but like most people his age, he stayed connected to friends and family through social media. His favorite was a local community group, a seemingly harmless page where neighbors shared news, posted garage sales, and warned about wildlife sightings. It felt safe, familiar, almost comforting to know that the people behind the profiles were real living, just a few streets away. That comfort did not last. It began subtly with strange posts appearing late at night under Jason's name. Posts he had not written. At first, he thought it was a technical glitch or maybe an innocent prank by a coworker. But when those posts started revealing personal details about his life, details no one outside his closest circle could have known, the unease took root. He changed his passwords, activated two-factor authentication, did everything the tech guides advised, but the posts continued. Then came the messages. Not public ones, but private, slithering into his inbox in the dead of night. Some were filled with admiration, others with cryptic warnings. Jason tried to ignore them, believing that cutting back on his online presence would starve the attention they fed on. He was wrong. One evening after a late shift at the emergency room, Jason returned to his cabin on the edge of town. The gravel crunched under his boots, the cold mist curling around the trees like restless spirits. He sensed something before he saw it. A flicker of movement near the front steps. His heart jumped, but when he approached, there was nothing but a package resting neatly against the door. No sender name, no postage, just his name written in careful block letters. Against every instinct screaming inside him, he opened it. Inside was a collection of printed photos, all of him, candid shots taken from a distance. Him walking to work, him grabbing coffee at the local diner, him jogging on the lakeside trail. Each image felt like a violation, a brutal reminder that someone was watching. Jason reported the incident to the local police, but resources were limited in a small town and without direct threats or proof of who was behind it. There was little they could do. Days blurred into restless nights. Jason became hyper-aware of his surroundings. He avoided familiar routes, stayed indoors, more shut his curtains tight. But even in isolation, he felt the gaze lingering. Social media had been a bridge. Once a way to stay tethered to his community, but now it had become a trap, a window through which a stranger could peer into his life. Then the escalation came. Jason woke one night to the unmistakable sound of his door handle rattling slow and deliberate. His breath caught in his throat. He sat frozen, listening as the attempt continued for what felt like an eternity before silence reclaimed the night. The next morning, he found another package, this time inside his screened porch. No broken locks, no signs of forced entry, just a quiet message that no place was truly safe. Inside the box was a single Polaroid photo. Jason asleep in his bed, the timestamp matching the hour he had heard the handle turn. Panic gave way to a terrible clarity. This was not random. It was personal. Someone had invaded his most sacred space. He thought of deleting all his accounts, going completely offline, but deep down he knew it would not be enough. The connection had already been made. There was no undoing the invitation he had once unknowingly extended by posting pictures, tagging locations, sharing moments he thought were harmless. Fear became his constant companion. He stopped answering calls from numbers he did not recognize. He limited his interactions, even with people he trusted, questioning every smile, every friendly gesture. Isolation, once a choice, now became a prison. Jason understood something that many still underestimate. Online visibility is a currency, and the more you spend it, the more you owe. Every post, every check, and every tagged photo was a breadcrumb trail leading someone dangerous straight to his door. Late one evening, desperate for some semblance of normalcy, Jason drove out to Whitefish Lake. He parked by the empty dock and sat staring out over the dark water, the surface barely visible under a silver sliver of moonlight. The cold seeped into his bones, but he welcomed it. Anything to feel something real, something unfiltered by fear. He thought about how easily life could unravel. A simple click, a simple post, and the delicate barrier between public and private life shatters. He remembered a conversation he once had with his mother, who lived 3 states away. She had warned him gently but persistently that sharing too much could someday cost him more than he realized. He had laughed it off, then believing he was too careful, too insignificant to attract attention. Sitting there alone, Jason knew how wrong he had been. When he finally returned to his cabin that night, he found one last package waiting for him. Inside was no photo, no message, just his house keys neatly arranged on a piece of black velvet keys he had kept on him at all times. Keys that had somehow been taken without his noticing. It was not a threat. It was a statement. Control had been taken from him long before he recognized the signs. Jason left Whitefish the next morning. No goodbyes, no explanations. He packed what little he could fit into his truck and drove until the mountains faded into memory. Somewhere along that endless stretch of highway, he made a vow not of revenge or bitterness, but of caution. He would never again offer pieces of himself to strangers cloaked behind screens. To anyone listening tonight, remember this: the internet does not forget, and not every audience applauding your life means you. Well, protect your peace, like your life depends on it, because sometimes it truly does. If you find these stories resonate with a part of you that understands the need for caution, for reflection, I invite you to join us here, where your safety is honored and your story is respected. Feel free to subscribe if you believe in a space where awareness matters more than appearance, where connection is built on trust rather than exposure. Thank you for being here tonight, and never forget, real safety begins with what you choose not to share. Every story leaves a footprint, a subtle reminder that our steps are never truly unseen. And now, we follow new footprints into a quieter place where isolation feels like safety until it no longer does. Story 3. Not all connections are safe. Amanda Reyes was 25 years old when she moved to Asheville, North Carolina, drawn by the vibrant art scene and the quiet comfort of living near the Blue Ridge Mountains. She had grown tired of the chaos in Los Angeles, tired of the endless noise and the invisible weight of pretending to be someone else online. In Asheville, she imagined she could start over, blend into the colorful anonymity of a new city, and finally live for herself, rather than for the curated version of her life she had shared for too long on social media. For a few months, it worked. She found a part-time job at a local bakery. She rented a small attic apartment overlooking the town square, and she filled her days with long walks, sketching sessions at the park, and coffee dates with strangers who slowly became friends. Her online presence dwindled to near nothing. Just a private account with a few trusted followers and occasional posts of sunsets or sketches, quiet glimpses into a life she had reclaimed. It was on one of those quiet afternoons that the first message arrived. At first she barely noticed it, a simple comment on a photo of her coffee cup and journal. "Nice to see you again." She brushed it off as a friendly remark until more messages followed, increasingly personal, referencing places she had been that she had never shared publicly. A sense of unease coiled in her stomach. She set her account to private. She changed her passwords, but the messages continued. They moved from comments to direct messages, from casual observations to unsettling familiarity. "You looked happy at the bookstore today." Loved the green scarf. Amanda told herself it was a coincidence. Maybe someone she had met in passing. Someone harmless. But deep down, she knew better. She stopped posting altogether, thinking silence would make her invisible. Instead, the messages grew angrier, accusing her of abandoning their connection, of being ungrateful for the attention. Fear seeped into her daily routines. She started varying her walking routes, sitting with her back to walls in cafes, scanning every unfamiliar face in the crowd. Still, the messages found her, each one a reminder that she was never truly alone. One rainy evening after a shift at the bakery, Amanda returned to her apartment to find a small envelope taped to her door. Inside was a photograph of her sketching in the park that morning, the timestamp written in neat handwriting at the bottom. Her hands trembled as she locked every door and window, drawing the curtains tightly against the storm outside. She reported everything to the police, but like so many cases of digital harassment, they had little to work with. No direct threats, no physical harm, just a growing sense of dread and an invisible hand tightening around her life. Amanda debated leaving Asheville, but where would she go? That would be safe if her presence online, however small, had already drawn unwanted attention. It was not just about deleting profiles anymore. It was about reclaiming her sense of security, her right to exist without being watched, judged, or owned by a stranger. Days turned into sleepless nights. Every knock at the door, every creak of the old wooden floors sent her heart racing. Anxiety bled into exhaustion until she felt like a ghost moving through her own life. In her search for answers, she stumbled across a support group for survivors of online stalking. Reading their stories, Amanda found something she had lost: solidarity, validation, a reminder that her fear was not irrational. These were real wounds inflicted not by hands but by eyes and words in the suffocating invasion of her most private spaces. Armed with this understanding, Amanda decided to fight back, not with confrontation but with boundaries. She documented everything, every message, every sighting, every suspicious car parked too long near her building. She installed security cameras. She changed her locks. She informed her landlord and her co-workers. She built a fortress not of bricks and mortar, but of vigilance and community. The messages eventually slowed their tone, shifting from possessive to frustrated to defeated. Silence, the kind she once craved for her art, returned to her life like a long-lost friend. Amanda learned a brutal but necessary truth. In those dark months, the internet blurs the lines between admiration and obsession, between visibility and vulnerability. What we share so easily, so innocently, can be twisted into chains that bind us without our consent. But awareness is a kind of armor, and boundaries are a kind of freedom. To anyone listening tonight, remember this. You are not obligated to be accessible to everyone. Your worth is not measured by your online presence. Your value is not in your likes or followers. It is in your right to live freely, safely and unseen when you choose. Share carefully, trust cautiously, and never let guilt keep you visible to those who do not deserve your light. If this story resonates with you, if you believe in building spaces where safety matters more than popularity, I invite you to stay with us here. Subscribe if you want to be part of a community that values your well-being over your visibility, that honors your right to exist without compromise. Thank you for being here, for listening, and for choosing to protect the most precious thing you have, yourself. Some lessons unfold in the silence between moments, and as one story closes, another begins, revealing how even the smallest traces we leave behind can be gathered by unseen hands. Story 4. Haunted by What I Shared. The wind howled across the empty fields of rural Nebraska, carrying with it the sharp scent of winter, even though the calendar still clung stubbornly to late autumn. A lone farmhouse stood silhouetted against the bruised purple sky, its windows dark, its silence almost accusatory. Somewhere inside, the faint blue glow of a phone screen flickered against the gloom, illuminating the face of Ethan Caldwell as he sat hunched over his kitchen table, scrolling through a series of notifications he did not remember triggering. Ethan had always been cautious online, a habit born from watching too many cautionary documentaries in high school. But caution did not prepare him for what it felt like to realize his life had been reconstructed, manipulated, and broadcast without his consent. It had started 2 weeks earlier when a co-worker at the grain elevator mentioned a strange account that seemed oddly familiar, posting pictures that looked exactly like Ethan's property, his truck, even his dog Samson. Curious and uneasy, Ethan searched and found it almost immediately, a profile filled with images and captions written in a voice that pretended to be his. At first, he suspected a prank, but the more he scrolled, the more invasive the post became. Photos, taken through windows, captions describing private moments he knew he had never shared. Ethan reported the account, of course, but the platform responded with automated replies, citing vague policies and offering little help. The post continued gaining traction among people he did not know, and the comments multiplied. Strangers speculating about his life, his choices, his worth. Each time he logged in, a new piece of himself seemed stolen, twisted into something unrecognizable. Fear crept in, slowly wrapping itself around his routines. He stopped taking evening walks with Samson. He pulled heavy curtains across the windows. He kept the porch light burning even after midnight. Isolation, once a peaceful choice, now felt like a cage. He wondered how much worse it could get, and then the packages started arriving. Small, nondescript boxes left at the edge of his driveway, always containing items he had mentioned once in private conversations. Things he had never posted about: a worn, leather-bound journal, like the one he had admired in a bookstore miles away. A keychain in the shape of a blue jay, his late mother's favorite bird. Gifts that felt less like tokens of affection and more like declarations of ownership. Ethan confided in Sheriff Mallory, a woman he trusted, but without clear evidence or direct threats, the law offered little protection. His world shrank even further until it consisted only of work, home, and restless nights spent staring at the ceiling, wondering who was watching, wondering when they would step out of the shadows. The breaking point came on, a night soaked with icy rain. Samson's barking woke Ethan from a restless sleep, and when he stumbled to the front window, he saw a figure standing just beyond the reach of the porch light. Not moving, not speaking, simply watching Ethan's blood turn to ice. He called out, but the figure retreated into the darkness, leaving only wet footprints on the wooden steps. The next morning, the account was gone, deleted as if it had never existed. In its place, a new one had sprung up, this time with video shaky footage taken from outside his bedroom window from behind trees as he walked to his truck from places he thought were safe. That was when Ethan realized this was not about admiration or hatred or even obsession. It was about power, about stripping away his control over his own narrative, his own sense of self. He could move, of course, sell the farm, start over somewhere else, but the internet is a ghost town where nothing ever truly dies. A photo once uploaded remains etched in the digital ether, a permanent scar on the map of memory. Ethan understood then that survival was not about erasure, it was about endurance. He began to reclaim his space, not by hiding, but by living deliberately. He built higher fences, installed better security, and most importantly, he reconnected with his small community. Friends who showed up with casseroles and shared silent evenings on his porch, neighbors who helped him repair the barn roof. Strangers who became a shield against the loneliness that his unseen watcher had tried to weaponize. He stopped logging into social media altogether, choosing instead to invest in tangible connections, the kind that left footprints in real soil rather than algorithms. Over time, the surveillance waned like a fire, starved of oxygen. The figure never returned, and the accounts faded into the background noise of a world too saturated with information to notice one man's quiet rebellion. To anyone listening tonight, know this. Your life is not a story owed to strangers. You do not have to perform your existence for validation or entertainment. The moments you hold sacred, the spaces you call home, deserve protection, not from fear, but from the silent erosion of privacy that happens when we forget the value of living unseen. If these words resonate with you, if you believe that your story deserves guardianship rather than exposure, I invite you to stay with us here. Subscribe if you value a community where connection is rooted in respect rather than curiosity, where safety is not a privilege, but a shared commitment. Thank you for sharing this space tonight, and remember, the truest parts of your life deserve to be lived, not posted. The weight of what we share, knowingly or not, builds over time. And now we turn our gaze to a new story, one where adventure and validation blur the boundary between thrill and regret. Story 5. Dragged deeper by attention. There was something about abandoned places that always fascinated Jordan Ellis, an artist who found inspiration in decay and forgotten corners of the world. So when an online trend emerged, encouraging people to explore abandoned buildings and live stream their adventures, Jordan felt an irresistible pull. It seemed harmless at first, a way to combine his love for photography with the thrill of discovery, and maybe even build a small following. The old train depot on the outskirts of Richmond, Virginia became his target, a place left to rot since the 1970s, a skeleton of rusted metal and shattered glass standing stubbornly against time. Armed with only his phone, a flashlight, and a naive sense of invincibility, Jordan announced his plan with a single post inviting anyone interested to tune in. He did not think about who might be watching, who might follow more than just his feed. That night, as rain slicked the cracked concrete and mist curled between the ruined structures, Jordan entered the depot, alone. His viewers climbed steadily, small comments scrolling across his screen, encouraging him to venture deeper. daring him to find the rumored underground tunnels hidden beneath the main building. Encouraged by the attention and craving more, he pushed forward, ignoring the knot tightening in his stomach. The interior smelled of damp wood and rust, the air thick with the residue of forgotten years. Every footstep echoed unnaturally loud, and yet within that cacophony of emptiness, Jordan occasionally thought he heard something else. A second set of footsteps, slower, deliberate, shadowing him from somewhere beyond the broken beams and darkness. At first he laughed it off, blaming his imagination and the tension of the moment. But the feeling persisted, gnawing at the edges of his courage. His viewers egged him on some urging caution, others mocking his hesitation. It was easy to get caught up in their energy, easy to forget that none of them could protect him if something went wrong. When he found the entrance to the tunnels, a jagged hole in the floor, partially covered by a splintered wooden hatch, Jordan hesitated for the first time. The comments exploded with excitement. Demands to go down to prove he was not afraid. A part of him, the rational part that still valued his safety, whispered that he should turn back. But the louder voice, the one fed by validation and invisible applause, told him he could not disappoint them. He descended into the darkness. The tunnel was narrow and damp, the walls sweating moisture, the air growing colder with each step. His flashlight flickered, and for a heart-stopping moment, total darkness swallowed him. When the light returned, he caught a glimpse of movement ahead, a figure vanishing around a bend. His breath hitched. He called out instinctively, forgetting that the stream could hear him, but the figure did not respond. It only waited. Jordan turned back, or tried to, but found the way behind him blocked by collapsed debris, forcing him deeper into the maze. His viewers began to notice the shift, their messages turning concerned, then frantic as the signal faltered. The image grew grainy and Jordan's calm started to unravel. Panic is a funny thing. It does not arrive all at once, but creeps up quietly, hollowing out your rational thoughts until only fear remains. Jordan stumbled through the tunnels, the damp walls pressing closer, the shadows thickening the footsteps behind him, now unmistakable and steady. At one point, he dropped his phone. It skittered across the floor, the screen cracking but somehow continuing to stream. He caught a brief glimpse of his own terrified reflection in a puddle before snatching the device up again. In that reflection, there had been another figure standing behind him close enough to touch. Somehow, the comments continued a distant chorus. He could barely register through the pounding of his heart. "Get out," someone begged. Too late, someone else wrote. The figure never spoke, never lunged, never showed its face clearly, but it never let him go. Jordan moved blindly, following the faint breath of fresher air, ignoring the way his flashlight now barely pierced the dark. Eventually he emerged into a collapsed section of the depot, gasping for air rain, soaking him to the bone. He did not stop to retrieve anything left behind. He did not care about the views or the applause anymore. He only cared about getting away. Later, in the safety of his cramped apartment, Jordan watched the playback of his stream. In frame after frame, there were hints of movement behind him, reflections in broken glass, brief glimpses of a figure just out of reach. His viewers had seen it too, screaming at him in the chat, begging him to run. Jordan learned something that night that no number of likes could ever outweigh. Some places are forgotten for a reason. Some spaces are better left unexplored. Validation of strangers is a shallow reward when weighed against your own safety. To anyone listening now, remember that not every adventure needs an audience. Protect your instincts as fiercely as you protect your breath. When a little voice inside you whispers that something is wrong, listen. It might be the only thing standing between you and a story that ends differently. If you find these reflections meaningful, If you believe in honoring intuition over applause, feel free to walk this journey with us. We value your safety more than your bravery. Thank you for spending this time here tonight. And remember, not everything needs to be shared to be real. Survival often looks like retreat, like choosing stillness over spectacle. And as we move forward, we find ourselves in a world softened by snow, but sharpened by the awareness of unseen eyes. Story 6: When Privacy Becomes Survival. The first snow of the season came earlier than expected, blanketing the streets of Duluth, Minnesota in a quiet, muffled white. For many, it was a signal to gather indoors to find comfort and warmth in routine. But for Lily March, it became a reminder of how exposed she had made herself, without even realizing it. Lily was a freelance writer who loved the solitude of long winters. Sharing her life online had once felt empowering, a way to connect from a distance, to build a world where her voice mattered. She had a modest following, people who appreciated her essays about small-town life, reflections on nature, snippets of her favorite books. It never occurred to her that someone could mistake that openness for an invitation. It started with a comment innocent enough, complimenting a photo of her porch, the way the morning light touched the old wooden swing. But Lily had never posted that photo. Not exactly. She had described it once, a passing mention in a caption about the first frost. A small, intimate detail meant for those who cared enough to notice. The next comment referenced her routine, the way she walked her dog around the block each morning, always stopping to admire the same gnarled oak tree. Again, something she had never documented directly, only hinted at. A chill settled in her that no amount of tea or blankets could shake. She reassured herself it was coincidence, the way small towns often overlap in quiet, unseen ways. But when an anonymous package arrived, filled with snapshots of her house from angles she could not explain, she knew better. Lily contacted the police, but they told her what she already feared. No direct threat meant little recourse. Their advice was cautious but clear. Tighten her privacy settings, vary. Her routines, stay vigilant. She withdrew further, posting less, sharing almost nothing, but the damage had already been done. In the strange arithmetic of the internet, a few breadcrumbs are enough for someone determined to find the trail. One night, as the wind howled against the windows and the snow thickened into an unbroken white curtain, Lily caught the faintest movement outside. A figure dark against the snow, standing motionless near the old oak. Watching, her breath froze in her lungs. She turned off the lights, crouched low, heart pounding so loudly she wondered if it might betray her position. Minutes dragged into hours. When she finally dared to look again, the figure was gone. But a single footprint remained pressed deep into the snow, a silent promise that she was not imagining the danger. In the days that followed, Lily learned how quickly isolation can turn from comfort into captivity. She limited her walks, avoided the usual coffee shop, declined invitations from friends too polite to ask why. Even writing, once a refuge, felt dangerous. Every word a potential leak in the dam of her privacy. But survival is not just about hiding, it is about adapting. Lily began taking control where she could. She installed cameras around her property. She adopted a second dog, a large, gentle mastiff who made her feel slightly less alone. She joined a local neighborhood watch group under a pseudonym, learning the rhythms of her community without giving away more of herself. In her journal, which she kept strictly offline, she poured her fear and anger and the slow rebuilding of trust in herself. There she rediscovered something important. Vulnerability does not mean recklessness. Sharing is not an obligation. Connection does not require exposure. The line between authenticity and safety is thin but real, and it deserves respect. One evening, months later, Lily returned to the oak tree with her dogs at her side. The snow had melted into soft mud, the first tentative buds of spring peeking through the soil. She stood there for a long time, breathing in the cool air, feeling the weight of the past season lift, if only slightly. She knew she would never post about this moment. It belonged to her alone, unfiltered, unseen. To anyone listening tonight, know this: your life is yours to protect. The most beautiful moments, the truest parts of who you are, do not lose value when they are kept private. You owe no one an explanation for guarding your peace, for choosing what you share and what you hold close. If these reflections resonate with something quiet inside you, if you believe in building spaces where safety is sacred and connection is earned, I welcome you to stay a while. Subscribe if you feel called to walk this path together, where your story remains your own and your light is never dimmed by the need for approval. Thank you for sharing this space tonight, and remember, what is sacred does not always need an audience to be real. Even the gentlest escapes carry shadows, and now we wander into a place where visibility once celebrated becomes a thread unraveling into unexpected solitude. Story 7. Hidden Moments. Sacred Peace. Fog clung low over the coastal town of Astoria, Oregon, swallowing the outlines of fishing boats and blurring the sharp edges of the rocky shoreline. It was the kind of morning where everything felt half-dreamed, half-remembered, and for Natalie Cooper, it was exactly what she needed. She had come here to escape, not from a scandal or a heartbreak, but from the quiet exhaustion that comes from being too visible for too long. After years of working as a travel blogger, documenting every trip, every meal, every fleeting sunset, Natalie realized she had nothing left that was truly her own. Moving to Astoria had been an impulsive decision, one made late at night, after realizing she no longer recognized herself in the curated life she had built. Here she kept her presence small, a private account with no public posts, no sponsored content, just simple photos of rain-soaked streets and misty mornings meant only for herself. It worked for a while, that delicate balance between presence and privacy, until the day she noticed a comment on one of her locked posts, a comment that referenced a specific detail about her favorite spot along the cliffs, a place she had never shared publicly, a place she thought only she knew, dismissing it as coincidence. Natalie tightened her privacy settings again, unaware that by then the gate had already been left open too long. Over the next few weeks, small things began to change. Her mailbox was found ajar when she knew she had closed it. Footprints appeared in the muddy path behind her cottage, too large to be her own. Packages arrived without return addresses, containing strange items like a pressed flower from the cliffs, or a rough charcoal sketch of the lighthouse she passed on her morning walks. Each gift seemed designed to remind her how visible she truly was, no matter how carefully she tried to disappear. Fear gnawed at the edges of her peace. She stopped going to the cliffs. She drew the blinds tighter. She even considered deleting her account altogether, but a stubborn part of her refused to surrender the small connection she had rebuilt in her new life. Yet connection without boundaries is a dangerous thing. One evening, returning from a grocery run, Natalie noticed her front door slightly open. The lock twisted and splintered. Her heart thundered in her chest. She backed away immediately, calling the police from her car with shaking hands. They found no one inside, nothing visibly stolen, but Natalie could feel the violation like a hand pressed against her back. The worst part was the note left on her kitchen table, written in careful cursive on thick cream stationery. "Beautiful place you have here." The police were sympathetic but honest. Without a clear suspect or tangible evidence, there was little they could do beyond routine patrols. Natalie understood then that safety was not just about locks or alarms. It was about how much of herself she had left unguarded, even unintentionally. That night, she packed a bag and drove inland without telling anyone. She rented a small cabin near Mount Hood, a place so remote that even cell phone reception was unreliable. For the first time in years, she was truly alone, not just in geography, but in spirit. It was terrifying at first, the silence pressing against her from all sides, but slowly it became a balm. She wrote in a notebook instead of posting online. She captured sunsets with her mind instead of her camera. She allowed herself the luxury of living moments without proof. In those quiet weeks, Natalie learned a different kind of resilience. Privacy is not about secrecy or shame. It is about preserving something sacred for yourself. Not every moment needs an audience. Not every beauty must be shared to be real. There is a particular kind of peace that comes from knowing you are allowed to exist unseen, that your experiences are valid, even without witnesses. One cold morning, while walking through the pine woods near her cabin, Natalie stumbled across a patch of snow still clinging stubbornly to the shaded earth. She knelt down, pressed her palm into the frost, feeling the sting of it, the truth of it. No one would see this moment, no one would like it, share it, or comment on it, and yet it mattered. She mattered. To anyone listening, now understand this. Your life does not require validation from strangers. Your worth is not measured by your visibility. You have the right to keep pieces of yourself untouched by public gaze, to live chapters that no one reads but you. If these words echo something in your own journey, if you believe in building a life rich with moments too precious to share, I welcome you to stay. Subscribe if you feel called, not because you must, but because you choose to honor your story alongside others who value the unseen as much as the celebrated. Thank you for sharing this space tonight, and remember, the most beautiful parts of your life may be the ones no one else ever sees. Every ending plants a seed for the next beginning, and so we journey onward into the final story where resilience is not just a choice, but a way of living in a world that watches too closely. Story 8. Escaping the Eyes That Followed. The city never truly slept, but on the outskirts of Chicago, where the forgotten streets surrendered to empty lots and crumbling warehouses, the night grew quieter, heavier, almost watchful. Gabriel Monroe felt that weight as he walked home from the late shift at the small tech repair shop where he had worked for the past 2 years. The streetlights flickered with a lazy rhythm, casting long, uncertain shadows across the cracked sidewalks. Gabriel was not the kind of man who drew attention. Quiet by nature, careful with his words, he had lived much of his adult life blending into the background. Yet it was the background that had betrayed him, the invisible architecture of the digital world he had trusted without question. He had been part of an online forum dedicated to urban exploration, a place where anonymous users shared photos and locations of abandoned spaces, exchanging tips on how to enter safely, how to capture the best angles. It was supposed to be a hobby, a harmless way to indulge his fascination with decay and forgotten history. He never used his real name, never posted photos of himself, only landscapes of rust and shattered glass. Still, somehow, someone had found him. It started innocuously enough, a message from a user he did not recognize. Complimenting his latest upload, a haunting shot of an old hospital wing drenched in early morning mist. Gabriel replied with polite thanks, nothing more. But the messages continued growing bolder, more personal, referencing locations, near his home events, from his life he had never shared. One evening, a new thread appeared on the forum, titled simply with his username. Inside were photos not of abandoned buildings, but of Gabriel himself. candid shots taken as he exited his apartment, as he shopped for groceries, as he rode the bus to work. Each image was accompanied by commentary observations about his habits, his clothes, the books he carried. Gabriel stared at the thread for a long time, a cold nausea rising in his gut. He reported it to the site moderators, but the thread vanished almost immediately, leaving no trace, as if mocking his attempt to regain control. The next morning, his apartment door bore a single small sticker of a crow, identical to the emblem many users on the forum used in their profiles. He peeled it off with shaking hands, feeling the adhesive cling stubbornly to the metal. Fear settled into his bones, not with violence, but with a slow, insidious certainty. Someone knew where he lived. Someone was watching. He bought new locks, installed a second deadbolt, changed his routes to and from work. He limited his online activity to the bare minimum, disabling every location tag, erasing every trace he could find. But erasure, he learned, was almost impossible once the world had decided to look at you. He began to notice the same car parked a few blocks away on different nights. A dark sedan with tinted windows, engine idling long after he passed by. Once he thought he saw someone standing in the stairwell of his building, a figure that melted into the shadows when he turned to look directly. At work, his manager grew concerned, noticing Gabriel's distracted behavior, his jumpiness. But Gabriel found it difficult to explain. How do you articulate a fear stitched together from glances, from coincidences, from the gnawing certainty that the air itself has grown too thick with unseen eyes? One night, returning home through an alley he had used 1,000 times before, Gabriel found a Polaroid photo taped to his apartment door. It was a picture of him asleep in his bed, taken through the window. He thought he had kept covered. No message, no demand, just the image itself. A quiet invasion more horrifying than any threat could have been. Gabriel did not sleep that night. Instead, he packed a single bag, grabbed what cash he had, and left before the first hint of dawn. He abandoned his lease, his job, the few belongings he could not carry. He bought a used car under a false name and drove aimlessly for days, crossing state lines, never stopping anywhere long enough to leave a pattern. At first, he was paralyzed by fear, checking every rear-view mirror, jumping at every unexpected sound. But slowly, the terror gave way to something else, a bitter understanding that his old life was unrecoverable. The illusion of anonymity, of safety through obscurity, had been shattered irrevocably. Somewhere in a dusty motel in Kansas, Gabriel began to rebuild himself. Not as someone hiding, but as someone choosing deliberate invisibility. He kept no social media accounts, paid cash whenever possible, stayed in small towns where strangers were noted but rarely remembered. He found work repairing farm equipment under the table, exchanged labor for shelter, kept conversations brief and smiles easy. In time, he began to sleep through the night again. He learned that survival was not about running indefinitely, but about refusing to be defined by fear. His life became smaller, quieter, but also strangely fuller. The small rituals of daily existence unnoticed by algorithms or cameras took on a new sacredness. Fixing a broken radio, mending a fence, sharing a silent meal with a farmer and his wife who asked no questions. Gabriel realized something that many people never have to confront. Directly, privacy is not a luxury. It is a form of self-respect. Choosing what to share and with whom is not selfishness, but survival. The world teaches us to crave visibility to measure our worth by our exposure, but true value often lies in the unseen, the undocumented, the fiercely protected spaces we claim for ourselves. Months later, sitting under a vast sky untouched by city lights, Gabriel watched a meteor streak across the darkness and felt no urge to capture it, no need to prove it had happened. It was enough that he had seen it. To anyone listening tonight, know that you are not less for keeping pieces of yourself hidden. You are not selfish for choosing silence over spectacle. You are not broken for guarding the soft, private parts of your life from a world that demands constant access. If these reflections speak to a quiet place inside you, if you believe in living a life that honors depth over display, I welcome you to walk with us. Subscribe if you choose, not because you are expected to, but because you believe in creating spaces where privacy is not a weakness, but a strength. Thank you for spending this time together tonight, and remember, your life is enough, even when no one is watching. You have walked with us through shadows and stillness, through moments of vulnerability and quiet strength. Each story a reminder that in a world overflowing with noise, the choice to protect your peace is an act of profound courage. It is easy to forget that behind every post, every shared image, every small disclosure lies a living, breathing life deserving of safety and dignity. It is easy to believe that more visibility means more value. But as these stories show, sometimes the greatest worth is found in what remains unseen, in what is held close and protected fiercely. Tonight, we have explored the subtle ways that technology blurs boundaries, that openness without discernment invites more than admiration. It can invite danger. We have seen how fear does not always announce itself with a roar, but often arrives quietly, patiently, wearing the familiar face of curiosity and connection. But more than fear, these stories are about resilience, about reclaiming the right to decide what parts of ourselves we offer to the world, and what parts we keep safely tucked away in the quiet corners of our lives. If these reflections have found an echo inside you, if you believe in nurturing spaces where privacy is honored and authenticity is not measured by exposure, then I invite you to stay connected here. Not for validation, but for community, for reflection, for the quiet strength that comes from choosing yourself first. Thank you for listening, for feeling, for remembering that your story, your safety, your peace of mind are worth protecting always.